And joining me live here on India Today in the wake of violent clashes that have taken place in at least 3 districts of Karnataka over the putting up of Savarkar banners and posters is perhaps India's top biographer of Veer Savarkar. Dr. Vikram Sampath, historian, author and best-selling author of a 2-volume biography of Veer Savarkar, joins me live from Bengaluru. Dr. Sampath, good to have you. Welcome and thank you for your time. I'd like to start right off, with the immediate developments over Veer Savarkar, because Dr. Sampath, we've seen Veer Savarkar become a recurring theme in the political debate, the political conversation, and now also in the street fighting that's taking place in Karnataka. What are you making of this? This fresh flare-up started in Shimoga with the erection of a Veer Savarkar poster in an area, after which 4 people have been arrested. 1 person was stabbed. What did you think of that?
Shiv, I think this is extremely unfortunate, and that too at a time when we are celebrating 75 years of our freedom, that someone who was in the forefront of our freedom struggle, Savarkar, he is being dragged in, as you rightly said, petty street politics, considering of course that the state is going to elections in a couple of months from now. So I see this as a fallout of that, which is extremely unfortunate, both for the people who have been injured in this clash and also to the legacy of Savarkar. Here was a man who formed India's first organized secret society, the Mitra Mela, which later became the Abhinav Bharat. Here he is a man who actually, led the first ever boycott of foreign clothes in India, by burning the foreign clothes in Pune in 1905, decades before even, Gandhiji came to India. Someone who gave a new history to India in the form of the 1857 uprising, which was hitherto called the Sepoy Mutiny. He, wrote a magnum opus called the First War of Indian Independence and elevated it to that status. Someone who was all the time kind of an inspiration for revolutionaries, be it Bhagat Singh, be it Sukhdev and Rajguru, be it Rash Bihari Bose, or even Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose till the very end. His book was, and he were inspirations for revolutionaries. To drag someone like him into this kind of political slugfest and street fights, I think it's extremely unfortunate, and we're doing great disservice to the sacrifices that someone like him has done. He was a man who got the highest, imprisonment of 2 transportations for life in the dreaded Kala Pani in cellular jail, amounting to 25 plus 25, 50 long years, and 14 years of which he actually spent the worst of inhuman conditions in the Andamans. So the least we can do is show some amount of gratitude and reverence to people like this who have sacrificed so much for the cause of our freedom. Instead, we are resorting to this kind of nonsense in the wake of politics.
The Prime Minister, Dr. Sampath, mentioned Veer Savarkar in his August 15th speech from the Red Fort as well. I'm sure you heard that. But the point is that many opposition parties, chiefly the Congress, have shaped Veer Savarkar as a hate figure, and it appears from the recent utterances from many opposition leaders, including the top command of the Congress party, that they've decided to hold up Veer Savarkar as a dominant theme going into this election season. A, what do you think of that? And B, do you think that's going to have any traction?
No, that's again very unfortunate, Shiv, because I think the Congress leaders need to go back and refer to their own tallest leader, Srimati Indira Gandhi. When Savarkar died in 1966, she as the Prime Minister had put out a very eulogizing message saying, his role in the annals of the freedom struggle is a very unique one, and that he is the very byword for patriotism, daringness and courage and so on. She got a stamp issued in his honor. She got a documentary film made through the government's INB ministry. She gave a personal grant to the Savarkar Memorial in Mumbai. So the Congress needs to then answer as to why, one of their tallest leaders, did she not know what all they are claiming that Savarkar is today, that he was a coward, he was a traitor, he was a British stooge, he was a conspirator in Gandhiji's murder. If he was all of that and he was a proponent of the 2-nation theory, he was an Islamophobe, xenophobe and all these other epithets which are hurled at him, why on earth would Indira Gandhi, an astute politician like her and a great statesman, why would she do something like that? So I think this is more recent vintage, where for their political slugfest with the BJP and with Mr. Modi and so on, history and Savarkar unfortunately becomes a casualty and the fall guy in the process.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that letter by Indira Gandhi because, because the Congress hasn't quite explained their stand on Veer Savarkar now when you juxtapose it with that very, you rightly said, a very eulogizing letter. I wanted to just quote Jairam Ramesh, the chief spokesperson of the Congress party, because some of those things you said have been said by him just, on 14th of August, a day before Independence Day. Dr. Sampath, he said, the tragedy of partition cannot be misused to feel hate and prejudice. The truth is, Savarkar originated the two-nation theory and Jinnah perfected it. Sardar Patel wrote, I felt that if we did not accept partition, India would be split into many bits and would be completely ruined. So this suggestion now that it was not Jinnah but Savarkar who originated and pushed the two-nation theory, that appears to be the new weaponization of the Savarkar debate by the Congress.
Nothing could be farther from historical truth, Shiv, because if Savarkar was really so powerful that he could actually have the nation split into two parts, then probably he would have ended up becoming the Prime Minister of independent India. The two-nation theory was propounded some 7-8 years even before Savarkar was born. In 1876, when Sir Syed Ahmad Khan first talked about Hindus and Muslims being two separate nations. And with the birth of the Muslim League in 1906, the Lucknow Pact, the separate electorates, the Khilafat movement, the communal award, all these were stepping stones to this whole Muslim separatism and the formation of a separate state based on religion. So in fact, it was the Hindu Mahasabha that Savarkar was the president of, and Savarkar who tooth and nail opposed partition till the very end, till about May, June 1947, when partition was actually a done deal. Including the Cripps mission that happened in 1942 that collapsed because the Hindu Mahasabha opposed it only because it led the way to the formation of Pakistan. The Congress was actually willing to accept the Cripps proposals in return for Pandit Nehru becoming the first defense minister under the Viceroy's cabinet. So I think when politicians enter historical waters, they make all kinds of allegations to suit current needs. But when we look at it from a cold, dispassionate, fact-based historical approach, the truth is far from what they actually claim.
Are there enough cold, dispassionate facts to dispel this whole, suggestion that the Congress and critics of Savarkar put forward, Dr. Sampath, that Veer Savarkar, apologized to the British? There are many unkind things that are said about him, especially by the Congress, in a kind of ugly manner. For instance, now you've got Jairam Ramesh also saying things like the modern day Savarkars and Jinnahs are continuing their efforts to divide the nation. The Indian National Congress will uphold the legacy of Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, and many others who are untiring in their efforts to unite the nation. The politics of hate will be defeated. Are those cold facts that you're quoting not enough to settle the argument once and for all over whether Savarkar was an apologist or not?
Yeah. No, it's in the shrill political debate, Shiv. History and facts don't matter to people. Rhetoric always somehow wins. And despite any number of books one may write, any number of talks or interviews one may give, the same thing is bandied time and again. I've spoken innumerable times about this whole petition business. It was a very normal procedure with several political prisoners who were lodged in the Andamans. They were given this privilege of filing petitions time and again by the British. So it was not something that was exclusively given to Savarkar. Along with him, Sri Aurobindo's brother, Barin Ghosh, who was there, Ulakar Dutt, Sachindranath Sanyal, who later went on to form the HRA and who was the inspiration for Bhagat Singh, he filed a petition. Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya filed a petition on behalf of all those who were accused in the Kakori case, Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan and others. So this was a very normal thing that a lot of revolutionary and political prisoners did. And in my book, I've actually put all these petitions
Yes.
in toto for people to read. Nowhere does it suggest that it's an apology. Rather, he's acting as a spokesperson for all the other political prisoners. In his 1917 petition, he says that if my name constitutes an obstacle in the release of all the other prisoners, you can delete my name and release the others, and that would give me as much pleasure as my own release would do. So very obviously, there were almost 100 odd political prisoners there, all young men in their late teens, early 20s, who did not know English, who did not know the law. And Savarkar and people like him who had English education, he was a barrister from London, he was acting as their spokesperson. And the British records themselves, Sir Reginald Craddock, a Home Department member who came to interview Savarkar in 1913, in his official document, he writes that I interviewed this man and he shows no remorse or regret for whatever he has done, his revolutionary past. So the British records are talking about it. His fellow revolutionaries, including Sanyal and others, have mentioned as to how, they also wrote petitions similar to those written by Savarkar on his advice, but they were released, but he and his elder brother were not released because the British considered them as a D category or a dangerous category criminal, and that if it would be let out, the Bombay presidency would again be up in revolutionary flame. And if if Savarkar had actually sold his soul, Shiv, to the British, after he came out in 1924, the British would have co-opted him. Instead, he was kept in house arrest for another 13 years. What was supposed to be 5 years kept getting pushed to, 2 years extension, and he was kept in house arrest for 13 years in Ratnagiri. And all the documents, I've quoted them extensively in my 2 volumes of the intelligence reports, where the British say this man is not someone we can trust. And right till the time the British left in 1947, they maintained this steady suspicion about Savarkar and his double dealing, especially with the, during the World War and so on. And also the underground revolutionary movement. So if someone had sold out to the British, he would have been co-opted into the government. He would have been made maybe the Prime Minister of Bombay State or whatever. But the very fact that he was a persona non grata for the British till the very end shows that, they did not trust him. And the reason they did not trust him is he and his elder brother Baba Rao continued to maintain these underground relations with the revolutionary movement, whether it was Durga Bhabhi, whether it was Prithvi Singh Azad, whether it was Chandrasekhar Azad, whether it was Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, Gopte, several others of that time, who and later Rash Bihari Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. This connection was constant and continuous, and therefore the British looked at them with suspicion. So today, for us to come up and sitting in our air-conditioned rooms without understanding these nuances of history, to call someone as an apologist and so on, I think it does a huge disservice to their legacy and also to their sacrifice.
I know, Dr. Sampath, that you've come under attack, especially on social media and elsewhere, for your books on Savarkar, your views on Savarkar, and you've spoken extensively about them, including here on India Today. Why, in your view, is there so much discomfort over, soberly told facts? It's not like you are screeching from the rooftops. You've written two volumes that are best-selling books. I've read one of them. I will be reading the other. They're told pretty factually. There's no sentimentalism about the books. Why do you think there's so much discomfort with that view of the setting front of those facts about Savarkar?
Yes, Shiv, I think Savarkar was one individual who in the entire history of the freedom struggle was a constant polar opposite of the mainstream narrative of the non-violent struggle of Mahatma Gandhi, of the Congress, of Pandit Nehru and others. So especially post-independence, to kind of make, demonize him. One is he was fixed in this whole Gandhi murder case, and he was actually honorably acquitted in the court because there was no evidence against him. So all of this had to be done to dishonor him, to make him a persona non grata in independent India, and to relegate him to the dustbins of history. And anybody who had any long association with him also paid the price. In the 70s, I often quote about how Pandit Hridainath Mangeshkar, who was in the All India Radio, he lost his job only because he tuned some of Savarkar's poems in Marathi and made his sisters Lataji, Ashaji and others sing those songs. So it's no surprise that today I, as his biographer, also face the same ire, because for the longest time there has been a narrative that has been set about him, and anybody who seems to upset this apple cart, I think that that person needs to be cut to size and actually discredited. They have to be called all kinds of names. Their work has to be discredited. And I probably braced myself for this attack, because as history shows, if Pandit Hridaynath Mangeshkar can be targeted, I am nobody in comparison. So this is something that is very unfortunate, that in a democracy, you can have differing opinions. If the mainstream was that of the Congress and of Gandhiji and Nehru and others, there were other people who had ideological differences at an intellectual level with them. So a democracy must offer space for all these other voices for dissent, discussion, debate, and differences, and not demonize somebody who holds a different view, or even someone who puts those facts out in the public. Because for the longest time, I think the establishment and the establishment historians, who were patronized by the status quo, they have ensured that these lies are perpetuated numerous times. And you repeat a lie 100 times, it assumes the flavor of truth. And that's what has happened in the case of Savarkar. And anybody who throws the light, and light is the best disinfectant. Yeah. So anybody who throws the light on this and actually shows the truth as it is, comes under vicious attack. And I realize this, that the viciousness can be rather vitriolic, much more than you can expect.
Oh, believe me, I know what you're talking about. To bring this discussion to a close, Dr. Sampath, circling back to what has happened in the three districts of Karnataka, where we've seen violence over the putting up of Veer Savarkar posters. In this particular instance, there has been a kind of face-off between posters of Veer Savarkar versus Tipu Sultan in this instance. I remember in 2018, it was Hanuman versus Tipu Sultan. So there's this nationalist versus bigot kind of narrative that's taking place using these posters now. What do you think of that? I mean, what would you say about this Savarkar versus Tipu Sultan kind of suggestion that's being made, especially in Shivamogga?
I think it's comparing apples and oranges, because these were two different men in two different eras. Tipu was in the 18th century and Savarkar was in the 19th and 20th century. Different circumstances. Tipu was a ruler, a medieval ruler, who was actually fighting for, not for the cause of a nation or freedom and so on. It was more of a fight for his own kingdom, for his own personal honor and survival. No doubt a brave soldier, but then someone who was killed and martyred in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. But then his social report card is also not something that that many can hold him to account, considering the kind of bigotry, the mass murders, the conversions of Syrian Christians in Mangalore, and also the Mandyam Iyengars, the Kurgis, the Nayars in Malabar, the thousands and thousands of temples that he desecrated, churches that he broke. These are that's a different era. You need to judge a person by the standards and yardsticks of that era. So that was a different time and space. So to compare him with someone like Savarkar, who was a modern day leader, just because he propounded the theory of Hindutva, you posit these two people, next to each other, which is, historically it has no basis whatsoever. Yeah. And it's very unfortunate that political parties start taking sides. BJP takes sides with Savarkar, Congress takes sides with Tipu Sultan. In the past, they have also, in my state, commemorated Tipu Jayanti and so on, much to the chagrin of many of the people here. People in various parts of Karnataka came out in protest, not inspired by BJP or RSS or anybody else. It was the genuine anger that still exists. The Mandyam Iyengars to this day do not celebrate Deepavali because 600 of their family, men, women and children, were hung to trees and killed by Tipu on Deepavali. So even today, Diwali is celebrated as a day of Shraddh and mourning by them. So these are also live histories, folk tales, which still abound. In spite of that, for political reasons, for appeasement politics, just to ensure you get the support of a particular community, you don't have to get an icon from that same community. certainly not a bigot. The same Karnataka also has a Sant Shishunal Sharifa, who's a,
Yes.
a saint who could be used as an icon for any community. Tipu is probably the Aurangzeb of the south, and he need not be posited as a leader for any community just to get their support or votes. So what we are seeing in Karnataka, I think, is an ugly, misuse of history for contemporary political purposes and for electoral gains, and that is extremely unfortunate. We are doing disservice to the legacies of, I think, both Tipu Sultan as well as Veer Savarkar.
Misuse of history for contemporary political gains couldn't possibly have described what's happening better. Figures from history continuing to divide us and dominating the political conversation. And as another cycle of elections, looms in front of us in Karnataka and Gujarat, and then the big election in 2024, I think we're going to see much more of Tipu, Savarkar and many of the others. Dr. Vikram Sampath, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for being with us here on India Today. Dr. Vikram Sampath has written 2 best-selling biographies of Veer Savarkar. With facts, you can read them and you can decide.